Hello, and welcome back to Graphic Policy, the comics podcast for folks who love comics and deal with politics because our world has no choice but for us to do so. We're being joined tonight with a special guest, Patrick Kindlon. Patrick is a comics writer whose credits include a decade of struggle in other artistic fields, some notoriety among people who get caught shoplifting from Whole Foods, and a few really great comics due largely to collaborations that elevate his work. His breakthrough book was We Can't Never Go Home, with writing partner and past Graphic Policy radio guest Matthew Rosenberg and artist Josh Hood. His most recent work, There's Nothing There, with artist Maria Llovet, ups the darkness in his earlier work to pitch black. And he's joining us on the podcast right now. Say hello, Patrick.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. This comic came on my radar because I give a read to pretty much everything that Black Mask Comics, which is a small comics publisher, sends my way. I'll at least skim it first. And the first issue of There's Nothing There definitely caught my interest. And I said to Brett that we have to reach out to you guys to get you guys on the show. And the new issue number 2, is out this week on Tuesday, right? I'm sorry, Wednesday, right?
It is, and if I can urge everybody to pay for my yacht, please go out, purchase it. It's a good comic, and you're doing a good thing for me. Thank you.
I certainly agree with that. So for folks who are not familiar with the series, the promo text is as follows. Celebrity socialite Reno Saletti does not believe in very much beyond Instagram comments, hipster drugs, and the flash of paparazzi cameras. So when a friend invites her to an, quote, eyes wide shut type party, she goes mostly along for the lulz, but the joke doesn't feel as funny when she realizes it's an actual occult ritual, and suddenly she's seeing things, horrifying apparitions warning her to, quote, run, quote. There's Nothing There is a stylish and hallucinatory thriller about losing yourself in the bright lights and finding yourself at rock bottom by writer Patrick Kindlon, artist Maria Llovet, and published by Black Mask Studios. So, I think that's a great actual description of the comic. Do you want to give our listeners a little bit of background on how this came to be?
Sure. Now, I've listened to the podcast, and what I'm about to say may read well with your listeners, or it may not. But I'm going to give you the honest story, and you can tell me how you feel after. I was in a comic book store in the South. I'm a traveling musician, and I often just stop into whatever comic store is in the area. And I don't remember, maybe Charlotte. I'm in a comic book store, and a young girl comes in, I would say 15 maybe, and she's looking for something had motivated her, a film, and I don't recall which one, but she came in. She was totally unintimidated by comic stores, which I'm a grown lifetime reader of comics, and I can find comic stores a little off-putting. But she was there for a purpose, and she just walked right in and said, "Hey, I'm looking for something in horror. I really enjoy horror, and I think it's possible that iZombie brought her to the store, if I'm remembering correctly." And she was looking for something in that lane, something that is dark, something that relates to her as a young woman, and something that it's just something smart enough. You know what I mean? Just something that grabs. And the poor comic store clerk ran around the store looking for anything to meet those needs. You know, and God bless him, Garth Ennis. You can't really say Crossed is a horror book, but I wouldn't suggest it to anybody but the most jaded weirdo. You know what I mean? And I'm suggesting to her From Hell, but From Hell is not a book that you necessarily enjoy at age 15. You know what I mean? You enjoy it years later. You know, and so the clerk is struggling. I'm struggling. And it got me thinking, you know, it might not be a popular thing at this exact time for me, a man in my 30s now, to be writing the perspective of a early 20s, late teens girl, but it seems like nobody else is stepping up to the plate on this one. So I was inspired by the fact that this young woman couldn't find anything that thrilled her in a comic book store. And I thought that was so unfortunate. So I said, you know what, I'm going to write with that in mind. And it's usually whatever comes out for me. I'm not a particularly planned person. You've interviewed my writing partner, Matthew Rosenberg. He really is a more planned person. He enters new ideas with strong themes that he wants to explore ahead of time. And that's really not me. I trip over themes. I'm stumbling around in the dark. But this series had purpose in the respect that I was like, wow, there's somebody who wants to engage a medium and can't find anything to their taste, and that seems impossible.
Yeah.
But it and you could suggest to this young woman, hey, these early Vertigo series seem to have the flavor that you want, but most of them you couldn't call horror. And if that's what she was looking for, it just seemed like she was without a paddle. And so that was the origin of There's Nothing There, which was, man, at the time I was living with a friend who, super, super smart woman going for her PhD, and her guilty pleasure was those CW shows like Pretty Little Liars and those programs that are actually too complex for me, if I'm going to be honest. Like they're all over the place. And watching this hyper intelligent person connect with what I thought was kind of like, if not lowbrow, then at least I think of it as popcorn, pure popcorn, right? And but watching the way that she connected with it, in the respect that it was really relevant to her life, in that it depicted people that she identified with and could relate to, but was also far enough away from her life that she didn't have to think about school and that at the same time. And it really, I don't know, it just motivated me. And like I said, it's at this exact moment, people really want stories told by people who have that lived experience. And I honestly can't say that I've ever been a wealthy 19-year-old girl. You know what I mean? Well, I can't say I've ever been wealthy to start. So I understand that that's what people are looking for right now. But without seeing it on the shelves, I said, you know what? I'll give it a go. and that's the origin of that book. And my collaborator on this, Maria, I had been an admirer of her work for a minute. She does a lot of Spanish language stuff that is, if our book together is a hard R rating, her stuff is an NC-17, no question. And she is really fearless in her depictions of sex and sexuality, and in a really motivating way, as odd as that might sound. Like, she tackles these things in a way that makes them attractive but not cheap, maybe a little bit lurid but not it doesn't feel exploitative. It's really I thought her work was so beautiful that I wanted to find something that might be relevant to her, and at the same time this kind of call to appeal to a younger person jumped in my head. So I don't know if that makes me sound like a 200-year-old man, but
no, I think yeah. I think she's a perfect fit for this, and I'm sure that having a woman who follows fashion and is as clear from the back matter that I've read and is clear from the content on the page is invaluable and essential to the book actually working, right? Because, one of the things that I complain about all the time in comics are how terribly misguided a lot of comic artists who are predominantly straight men are at drawing clothes that have anything to do with fashion or have anything to do with what normal people wear. So, not only do they not understand fashion, they don't, when they wake up in the morning and they look on the street to see what their neighbors are wearing, they don't even get that right. Meanwhile, Maria is totally nailing it on all of those fronts. And I think that, this is just a great collaboration from the two of you guys.
Thank you very much for saying it. I'm going to agree with you, and at the same time offer a soft counterpoint if I can. I agree with you. There is no doubt that every if not every other book, we could say 8 out of 10 books on the shelves represent a really narrow male perspective, right? And there's no denying that. And my only counterpoint to that, and this is not to argue that we need more of it, obviously. It's just a thought that I had today, to be honest, which was whenever I see somebody who doesn't get it right, I'm fascinated by their choices in failure as much as I am sometimes by success. And this is coming from, this is admittedly coming from somebody who does not need any further representation. So let's just acknowledge that straight away, right? Like it is, if somebody gets it wrong, it doesn't faze me the way that it might faze somebody who was really hoping for an accurate representation of any type and doesn't get it. So totally acknowledged. But as on a pure craft level, I find it very interesting, the missteps as much as, like, perhaps you saw it, there's a panel going around, it must be from an Avengers book. It's going around the internet right now, and it's the surest sign that your book was drawn by a man. Have you seen this?
I haven't seen that. That's like something I should see.
Yeah, I feel it's right up your alley, and it's also undeniable. It's very beautifully drawn. The draftsmanship is great, but the angles chosen are from beneath She-Hulk's butt cheeks, in such a way that like now to me, and again, this is totally acknowledging that I am not the one hurt by misrepresentation. This is totally acknowledged, but from when I see that, I now thinking about matters of getting it right, I say, oh, that was a definite misstep. Isn't that kind of interesting that wouldn't get caught? But again, I understand
that's why it didn't get caught. I don't care. So I would just say, having not seen this graphic, I would also just say that, like, I am not anti-butt shots, but they should be butt shots in a context in which they make sense, right? Like, there's so many just completely inappropriate butt shots, and also butt shots of characters for whom the butt shot is inappropriate. But butt shot can be good in certain contexts. But, like, why is there a butt shot in the courtroom? Like, why is a woman lawyer in a court scene wearing a skirt that women who are lawyers in court don't wear as lawyers? You know, or like, why is a 15-year-old being objectified in this graphic? You know, why is somebody who's crying over the death of a child, why is their butt hanging out, etc.? In a different context in the story, the butt shot could be completely reasonable. And I mean, so it's really a question of context, right? Like, well, and just ubiquitousness, like, you know, why is this happening in this scene? Are you using this shot to just show that the only way you relate to female images is all of them? Or is there a storytelling aspect of, like, you know, we're trying to look at this as an erotic moment because of different specific reasons to the story? That would be my feedback. So my partner, my romantic partner, is a comparative literature student. Yeah, that's her passion. That's what she wants to continue for the foreseeable future. She loves that so much, and we argue so much because so much of that course of study is finding meaning or applying lenses, theoretical criticisms to things that as a creator I can say are often totally just oversights on our part. You know what I mean? Our total blind spots. And so she and I clash on that in a coupley way. And I have a different perspective than you on this matter, which is I am actually totally for the utterly absurd, the totally contextless butt. I'm pro. I just think the misfortune is that there's not enough of the other thing. I think that the context-free butt is perfect, like, because, you know, there's these creators that we don't need to name their names, but there's these creators that they continue to do the same thing, and we continue to wonder why they
they quote unquote can't get it right, and I mean from representation standpoint, from the depiction, like a charitable depiction standpoint, and we're just keep looking at them and being like, damn, it seems impossible that somebody could get it wrong. But what I've come to understand is, oh, that is this person's lane. That is this person's milieu. That is this and there's nothing inherently wrong with that, unless that's what's dominating the shelves. If that's what's dominating the shelves, then the biggest frustration, I think, to probably 90% of your guests, and regardless of where they fall on matters like this, is that it is deeply frustrating that there's people that go their entire lives not having a real moving experience with sequential art because they go to a comic shop, they seek out, they look for the experience, and then they look on the shelves, and there's only two colors. You know what I mean? There's the butts, and then there's the near butts, and that's it. and that is the misfortune to me. It's not, some of these fellas. I'm not looking to exonerate myself here, but I often think that I am emotionally arrested at 22. You know what I mean? Like this crosses my mind every once in a while. I have so many of the same interests that I did at 22. I struggle with so many of the same things, and if there's growth in me, it is really small increments. And I think about the other creators who might suffer that even more than I do. You know, like they might be at a halt. Like you and I can talk off air about guys who don't seem to have made an inch of narrative progress, emotional progress. Their work is arrested development, and to me that is fascinating. And also totally sad when it is 75% of the market. so
yeah, totally.
That's my perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's good about what you're bringing to the shelves is exactly what you described about going into the store, right? Is you didn't see a book that fit that niche yet, so you did it. I mean, I think one of the reasons why this comic worked for me, and granted, I'm not 19 either, so I can't speak to that, right? But
right.
You're not looking like it would be so easy. And maybe I'm reading this differently than you're writing it, but it would be so easy for your protagonist, Reno, to just be a mockery who you're looking down on, but you're not doing that at all. You're writing her as a flawed character who's interesting and funny and says stuff that's dumb sometimes, but that's not because she's dumb. It's because the whole world's dumb. She says stuff. Yeah.
It sounds like you got exactly what I was shooting for, which is the tightrope walk of the thing, which is that that's a ridiculous world, and these characters are in some ways totally laughable. But if I was doing my job at all, they also seem like human beings. Yeah. And you just paid me the highest compliment, because that's the anxiety that I had is. And, Matt Pizzolo, who you might know at Black Mask, when I pitched this idea to him, he said his first response was, there's nothing clever about picking on the rich. And you know what I mean? Like you've got to have an angle to make it relevant satire, to make it cutting in some sort of way. And I said, hold on, you didn't let me finish. She's not bad. There's nothing. This is like so many women that I know. She just happens to be wealthy, and there's a whole set of problems and a whole set of myopic worldview that comes with wealth. But this is not to ridicule. You know what I mean? Like, this is not to take an easy. If there's a joke on the people, on the characters in this book, it's also it's firing back at the audience at the same time. You know what I mean? The reader is also taking shrapnel on the joke, and I think that's and not to spoil anything, but what's fascinating is, to me, on a craft level, is that by the end of this series, I feel like my anxiety is that I have done Reno a disservice, done the lead a disservice, because towards the end, the Celia character really seems to be more more than just the voice of reason, seems to have, usurped Reno's lead in some sort of way, because maybe my family as a writer, like I felt like I was in dangerous territory of being too condescending, and that's you really thank you so much for that compliment, because it seems bizarre that I would say I'm punching down at wealthy socialites, because certainly,
right, but it wouldn't
not.
be the wealth that you'd be punching down on, right? It would be the youthfulness and the femaleness that would be getting punched down on, and yeah, I don't sense that. And it was certainly something I was on the lookout for in reading it, but it's just not something that I felt when I read it. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, I enjoyed like the moments that she has with her friend who's a fashion designer, and sort of like the fact that character has her own voice and spunk as well. And yeah, like, Reno is funny and she says things that are funny. So she's not just subject of humor. She's also a source of humor because she's funny. That she says things that are funny as well, which I think is partially why that works for me.
Thank you. And let's also, I think, to your point, let's address like an even larger elephant in that room, which is that as a man in my 30s, if I was writing a 19-year-old girl character and taking shots occasionally, that might even be passable. But robbing her of her agency at any point would be unacceptable. You know what I mean? And that's the part that I'd be curious, because I'm really, to be frank with you, I've been a musician my adult life. I'm available to criticism at all times because it just comes at all times. So when you finish the series, you can let me know if I failed in my task I won't take it personal, but I think Maria and I nailed it, because I got to say Maria is a good check on my potentially idiot behavior. You know what I mean? And because she'll ask, she'll say, am I reading this depiction right? You know what I mean? Is this how we wanted to go? And I'll reflect, and I'll say, because the other issue, maybe this is elephant in the room number 3, is sexuality. The sexuality of a 19-year-old girl and me writing as a 30-year-old, that there's some elements there that are potential pitfalls. and you can tell me at the end if I navigated those waters. I'm sure, because we got a really nice write-up. I think it was from Teen Vogue about kind of an LGBT angle to the book, but that's only it's only half intentional. It's later in the series, Reno has straight sex in a way that I think some readers might an issue with. They might quibble with it, and I think that between Maria and I, we depicted it in the most appropriate. I think we captured the moment of somebody that is in a very strange space in their life, but I also expect maybe some people won't feel that way. So please do let me know. I'm not, like I say, I'm not particularly. I think that some of these fellas out there that get really sensitive about, maybe you saw this. I'm going to tangent out for a second. It seemed like comic book creators were some of the last people to get Twitter, and as a result, they really struggled for the first. I mean, this is not to pick on the guy, because I have a total amount of respect for his work, but I think Dan Slott, for a long time, the Spider-Man writer, was kind of did not know how to do that. And who can really blame him? He's probably a 40-year-old man that got onto Twitter 4 years ago and was, he was used to maybe. Well,
many people have pointed out that Marvel and DC really do have an imperative to be like a large for-profit and non-for-profit organizations are and actually train their staff in how to interact on social media. But I hear you on that.
So I'm gonna defend some of the, because firstly I'm going to take accountability in that I will get really rough on somebody that enters my space with what feels like purely bad intentions. If you come to me with, hey, I have a question about your work, I may or may not answer it, but I'm definitely going to treat you respectfully. If you come into my space with open hostility and seemingly like an immutable agenda, something that you are convinced you are like, so this is not me. Please don't misunderstand me. This is not me attacking you, but I listened to the graphic policy episode regarding Secret Empire, and I was really fascinated by all your takes on it. Not because I thought you were all necessarily wrong about anything, but because I really felt like it's Nick Spencer, yeah. I thought that on occasion you were doing Nick Spencer the disservice, not you in particular, but the show was doing Nick Spencer in particular the disservice of assuming his motives, and I thought that's like a thing that I struggle with, and this is me revealing a vulnerability. So if somebody's listening to this and wants to attack me online, now they know how to get me. But assuming my motivations puts me in a space where I become really confrontational. So like I understand, like, because I'm like the sort of dude that, again, I take so much criticism that I am pretty good with it. I also come from a large family where criticism is just the norm, but so I'm good with it. But sometimes when people assume the worst about someone that they don't know, that can put me in a space when somebody does that to me. So I'm sympathetic to the Dan Slotts of the world who struggled for the first couple of years on Twitter with people coming in and being like, "You hate Peter Parker." You know, I mean, this is your liberal.
That's very different.
See, it is and it isn't, and let me explain if I can. Now, we have a tendency to look at politics, and particularly politics as practical politics as they relate to the way that somebody's going to have to go through their life, and we see, for reasons that are totally valid, we say, hey, we can't compare that to this other thing, but perception is reality in so many ways, and for some people, I'm not suggesting this is a healthy way to go through life, but for some people, the way that they identify with characters, the way that they identify with themes, the way that they identify their connection to literature, and again, we're talking about corporate comics, so I understand that people don't want to give it literature. I get that, but like those people that come in and with the same intensity that you see somebody attack somebody for a political belief, when they come with that same intensity, it can feel, and again, I'm not suggesting for a second, please don't misunderstand me, I'm not suggesting that writing Nick Spencer or questioning Nick Spencer for Secret Empire coming out at a time that seems perhaps politically a total misstep or ill-timed. I think that's a conversation worth having. I really do. But what I'm saying is that from the creator perspective, it can often feel the same intensity in the same way, and as what you and I might call some nutty people. And what that does is it creates white noise and makes people's guard go up. Like
right.
Okay,
they can't tell the difference. And I definitely heard this from other folks in the industry, like that they are so used to having guys complaining about they don't like that Ben Reilly is Peter Parker, that they can't hear the difference between I don't like Ben Reilly as Peter Parker versus you are presenting trans panic as an actual immediate safety to trans women. Like they can't hear that difference because they've learned to dismiss the Ben Reilly Spider-Man as like background bullshit noise. I mean, and like I get where that's coming from, but they have to move past that, and we're giving them plenty of opportunity to do so now.
But and I think they're getting better. I really do. And maybe you don't experience that on a one-to-one, but I'm seeing it more broadly. It's just that I think that what you just said is perfectly valid. The other thing that we're not addressing is that somebody who might have that same perspective that you just voiced, which is a totally valid criticism that we can talk about. And if the creator chooses to, he can engage and say, "Hey, okay, let me explain myself," or whatever. Those are valid. But at the same moment that you are presenting that critique, somebody is also offering that same critique while using ad hominem attacks on the creator. So
yeah,
while
it sucks.
you are just, but what I'm saying is that, like, I think ultimately we're saying the same thing, which is that this is an unfortunate thing that people need to work past. But as I just got to say, like, if I opened my inbox and 250 people were calling me a Nazi, which I got to jump in on this, a lot of the Marvel staff, when they heard that, there's not that you, I mean, we're in a weird time where perhaps you could be. You could be Jewish and have what you and I would call alt-right sympathies or whatever. We're in a very strange time, but there's plenty of people working at Marvel who are Jewish. And when they saw that their colleague was being accused of being a Nazi 200 times a day, it really shook them. And this is weird because I don't work at Marvel. This is not like I'm not trying to die on a hill here. I'm just saying that, like, it is. If you have a valid point and Nick Spencer has a counterpoint or a point that he believes is valid, you're both getting lost in a din of people that are screaming the word Nazi at Nick Spencer, which we can say a lot of things about Nick Spencer if we chose to. Nazi is not an accurate appraisal, you know. So it's like, I'm perfectly agreeing with you on the fact that, like, it would be so nice if creators could parse the nonsense from the valid criticisms and engage with those valid criticisms. But I am playing a bit of devil's advocate by saying it is very hard.
But the thing is, we're subject to this. We're subject to this as well in other aspects of our work. I mean, the amount of insane stuff that I receive from Nazis, generally speaking, on social media, as well as, like, anti-immigrant folks, like, trying to call through the amount of online hate that I get versus, people responding to things that are, valid feedback or raising things that maybe I should consider or think about differently. Like, it's something that I deal with as well. And that's part of the labor of our work, I mean, and I don't have a corporation, like, backing me up to like, look out for any of those interests in those ways.
Do you ever shut down, though? Because I guess what I'm trying to say is I wouldn't blame you for a second if you did. If I were you and I opened my inbox and somebody was spitting vitriolic misogyny at me for just expressing an opinion on my radio program, I'd probably just shut down. I'd be like, okay, listen here, you SOB, you blah, 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 blah. And then I would say, you're muted, go scream into the void. And it would be like, I'm saying that, I guess what I'm ultimately saying is I might not be built for the discourse right now. Because when people scream at me, like, I have a childish response that is not corporate, that is not professional, and through the other lens, through your vantage, like, and your experience, is not constructive. You know what I mean? Like you would say, hey, I don't have a corporation, I'm not beholden to that, but you're a passionate person about the things that you care about in this medium, and you want the conversation to be constructive, and I might lack both professionalism and the ability to be constructive when somebody comes at me with a certain angle that I feel is unfair. So I guess I'm just projecting right now. But I feel some of the Dan Slotts of the world when they just go dark, or when they say, or when they have to make a joke out of everything. You know what I mean? Like I feel that.
I mean, I think removing themselves from the conversation would certainly be preferable to what a lot of folks have done.
I get that. I get that right now we're seeing Nick Spencer as antagonistic. I get that. But in defense of him, a guy that I've never met and have read 3 of his books, he obviously feels passionate. And if I could point out something that I don't, maybe you guys even mentioned it on the podcast, he is a classical, he is a liberal in the 1970s through 2000 model. And he is a classic that, so far as we can tell based on everything he's given us. And that is out of sync with what a lot of people feel passionately about right now. And the thing is that when I read his tweets, and I've at times muted him too because I struggle with some of the, like, it does feel antagonistic, but I think he now I'm giving him motives. I think he genuinely feels like he's coming from a place of, hey, these are the values that I actually think are good. Like I'm a classical liberal that like you. I don't think he identifies as a leftist at all. He's just like, I'm a classical liberal. I think that society operates best this way, and I think we make incremental change towards a progress that even the staunchest leftist would believe is the right direction. I just think that it's unfortunately it's baby steps. It's not revolution.
Well, I would certainly encourage him if he wanted to come on. That would be a fine conversation to have. But I do think it's a little bit for us to try to have a debate over like his beliefs or
it's inappropriate for me to be sitting here guessing. I'm just it just seems like. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it just seems like the conversation so much in comics right now is not between necessarily enemies, but between really intense versions, the really intense like if there's a side to the spectrum, the side seems to be at odds with itself instead of attacking what you might call like the other side. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's pretty reductive way of looking at the struggle and crisis that people find themselves in. But I understand that people who are coming from his perspective don't understand or relate to the experiences that we're experiencing, so they don't understand why it feels different to us.
Totally valid point. I argued about a year ago. A really intense dude that I've met in person a number of times. Started a conversation on race with me, and I forget what it was. It was something. It might have been one of our shootings, like a racially motivated shooting in the U.S. And I was arguing moderate white guy side, and didn't know that. Had a full argument, not knowing until the very last thing that came out of my mouth, out of my fingers as it is, when you catch yourself proving the other person's point. when you say, oh, I'm able to ask you to be more patient because I'm not in any danger at all.
Right.
But the thing is, like as you said, that's a place, that's a conversation that requires conversation. Again, it's totally weird that I would come barking on you for Nick Spencer because I don't know the man at all. But it got me thinking when I listened to that podcast. I was thinking, Nick, so far as I can tell, Mr. Spencer, because I don't know him, so far as I can tell, is like 90% of the people that I've met in corporate comics, who are well-intentioned, who are what we would have considered great allies 10 years ago, but at the moment, it's just like maybe they feel a little bit out of sync. You know what I mean? So I'm inclined to defend them because I can see that perspective. But you raise a very good point. I can see that perspective because I likewise I'm not on the chopping block in the way that sometimes people of color are, or women, or trans people. So,
I would just say real quick that I think that your value in those situations is much more to be able to communicate with the men who are in those positions to help them understand where we're coming from, than necessarily to plea for, patience perhaps on the part of those who are on the last of our string. But I do think that you would be a good person to speak with them, certainly, because you're definitely seeing what they're not on that. But I also just want to give a moment to say that my co-host, Brett, is now joining us. He just escaped from a movie that I believe he just DM'd me about how the movie may have been, quote unquote, a turd, quote. So I'm, Brett, do you want to say hello real quick? And what is it that we should avoid seeing now that you've warned us? Oh, wait, I don't think I put your voice on the show. You're probably... No, I added you. Okay, you're not on mute. Are you on mute?
You might be on mute.
Oh, shoot. You might be on mute. Sorry, 1 second. We can't hear you. This is such a high-end production we're dealing with right now, my friends. Well, anyway, I do want to make sure that we have time to talk about the comic itself, which is,
Sure.
I think we try to make a point of elevating independent work on the show because there just isn't really a great way for folks to know what else is out there and to try something different otherwise. I actually came here not actually having read, I know this is completely shocking, not having read, Brett's going to try and call him again, not having read, the name of your comic, which everybody freaking reads.
We Can Never Go Home.
Thank you. We Can Never Go Home. In spite of the fact that I'm completely obsessed with 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank, I just haven't had a chance to read We Can Never Go Home. So I really did just pick this up. Okay, we're going to let Brett in. Brett, you're there? Brett,
this works?
Yes. Brett is
now
here,
works?
yes. Brett has definitely been a big champion of We Can Never Go Home, by the way. I would just say that. But Brett, what was this amazing movie that you've just escaped from?
The new Transformers, which was 2 hours and 45 minutes of life-sucking...
Brett.
I saw it for free, and I still want my money back.
Oh, man. Everyone is dumber as a result of this cultural product. Is that a takeaway?
I think that gives it too high a praise.
You will find no stronger advocate for lowbrow than me, and I can't watch those movies.
Well, so what's weird is, I praise it to Elana a lot, is the comic series is really, really smart and fantastic. There is some of the best political philosophies being debated in Transformers. It is impressive. Clearly the people involved in this...
I did not know.
Well, so there's, I forgot how many years ago. It was 5 years ago. Lana would tell you when I started going off the Transformers craze.
Yeah.
There's 2 comics, and the entire comic is just Optimus and Megatron basically debating back and forth about their philosophies and the difference between terrorism and revolutionary. It's really, really smart, and it kind of goes into this treatise that Megatron wrote, and I was shocked to find this in a Transformers comic. Really smart writing. Clearly, whoever was behind this film, and I need to go look that up, has never read any of the comics.
Yeah. My criticism of them is even more base than that. I saw the first one in 2008 or whatever it was, and it looked like a bunch of weird tinfoil moving around really fast, and it gave me a headache. And since then, I have said I have no need for Transformers. I'd sooner listen to a Transformer audio, BBC audio play, than I would watch those weird pieces of metal move around really fast. It really actually kind of made me nauseous, to be honest. It's just a weird, maybe I could be the only one, but it's...
This was in IMAX and in 3D, and there was points where it was getting to me. And that's the first time I've ever experienced that in a film. So I don't know what was up. It might be one of the worst films I've ever seen, and I've seen some really bad films. But it's still going to do $750,000. I guarantee that one.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. We were talking about We Can Never Go Home before. I just wanted to say you're a big fan of Four Kids Walking to a Bank. If I could big up my writing partner for a second, how good is that book? It's a really good book.
It's amazing.
Really good. Like I honestly like Matt does good work. Matt's a good writer, but I really like on that book in particular. I think being able to fully do your voice is such a benefit, and obviously Tyler is killing it, like making that a reality. But it is. I really felt like, damn, this first issue, I was like, this is a wildly impressive first issue that I hope gets some eyes on it, because I don't see how you couldn't come back. That's me big upping my partner, but I also definitely actually feel that. I actually think it's a great book. Because I can be critical of the books of his that I don't think are killing it, and that book is killing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the great on that series is it really feels like people you know. Like these were kids I knew in school, and something I loved. And We Can Never Go Home, I kind of got that vibe a little bit too. Like there was something about, you know, the two main characters that were really relatable with Madison and Duncan, and you know, their types and kind of how they interacted and all that. Like, is that, you know, working with Matt on that series, you know, how much is that his voice, your voice? Like, what was it, a combination?
I give that all to him because those characters. I don't know if he discussed this on the show when he was on. That is his lived experience insofar as the not science fiction elements, not crime elements, but the actual human to human. And pardon me, my upstate New York accent comes out when I attempt to say human. That exchange, that personal exchange between somebody who doesn't get it and this kind of force of nature, other character, is that the person who doesn't get it has romantic inclinations for it. That is Matt's lived experience. He has a really, maybe he could talk to you about it sometimes. He has like a somewhat tragic experience in his past, and I don't mean kind of I hope I'm not painting him out as unrequited love guy. It's not like that. It's he had a romantic partner that he thought he could help in the way that children or misinformed people believe that they can help other people, and it took a long time for him to realize, like, oh, I'm not equipped to do this, and I've also been presumptive. I've been presumptuous in thinking that I could, or that this person wanted that, or that I have a right to just kind of impart it, and that's why that feels so like the core of that book. Because when I describe it to people, I say you could call it light superhero, or you could call it light science fiction, or whatever. But what it's about is these two human beings, and I give that entirely to Matt, because my role on that book was much more on the practical level of, hey, is this stupid? Yes, Matt, that's stupid. Don't do that. Do it the other way. Hey, is this stupid?
People like that.
No, that's so that sort of really that character to character, I give every ounce of that to Matt. So when people praise that book, they, in my experience, they are praising you can't call it romantic. I don't know what to call that. A layered, more complex than what we typically see in 5-issue series. That relationship is from Matt's learned life and from his experience, and I think he transcribed that really, really well.
How did you actually get into creating comics?
So I'm a musician, and Matt and his partner, his business partner, but also his romantic partner of over a decade, they ran they ran a record label together. And Matt and Claire approached me and said, would you like to do a record? And we started talking about it, and we never ended up doing a record together. We ended up starting a 10-year career in comic books. So, and it was one day. I have a terrible memory, but I remember exactly where I was. Matt called me up and said, "Hey, I know this is your interest too. I know that this is what you're trying to get done, but you and I are both not taking steps individually to get it done. Do you want to make sure that we are constantly handing the other person the baton to make sure that the other person is always running?" And I said, "Yeah, let's do that. Let's see if we can't cut the 10-year, kind of paying your dues. Let's see if we can't shave a couple years off of that." You know what I mean? Because we're both getting older. So we're starting late by comparison to a lot of our peers. We know guys who started aggressively pursuing their career in comics at age 22. You know what I mean? And Matt and I were 6 years older than that. We were like already to be 30-year-olds basically. And so that is how that started. It just came from a hey, if we're always working, we are always motivating the other person to work as well. You want to do it? And I said, yeah, absolutely, let's do that. So that's how it started, and we have a ton of work that just exists in the ether right now that is just all, like, to me, fascinating. I'm a process guy. I don't care. Like, this is not the thing to say to any potential publisher listening right now, but my interest in art is process, and I like fumbling. I like errors because it's just fascinating to me. And Matt and I have a body of work that has never seen the daylight because it is all process stuff. And that is, and now Matt has really, the Marvel readers are connecting with a lot of his work, and it's kind of like one of those really nice things when a plan, when Hannibal from the A-Team says, "I love when a plan comes together." It's a bit like that.
What is it like? What part of the process do you enjoy? Like, I helped put together one comic, and it was a really interesting experience. But for you, what's something that you particularly like about it?
So, as a musician, I like the stuff that other people don't like, which is I like the problem-solving element. I like that it is always a different hassle, because I've been singing since I was a kid, and I have a terrible voice. And the only way, like, I can only reproduce 2 notes. So for me to try to create kind of challenging, interesting music with, maybe a third of what people have is frustrating at times, but really a life-affirming kind of problem-solving and exercise. And that's how I feel about comics. For me, issue 5 so for example, there's nothing there. This volume concludes with issue 5, and I wrote it not too long ago, and it came in a wave of pure mania, which is totally odd for me. That's not how I write, and it was so interesting from a problem-solving / process / kind of just craft experience that, I'm going to see the results of this incredibly strange, writing, 8 pages at a time, my brain functioning on the, I must have been mainlining yerba mate or something because I was moving super fast, and that I cannot wait to see on paper. That is the joy of comics right there. That is because if I messed up, by the end of that book, by the end of that series, there are so many threads to tie together. It's basically my favorite type of story where everybody at the end, maybe I watched Cannonball Run too many times as a kid. Everybody is going to the same place. And that is really hard to depict in 32 pages or 28 pages or, God forbid, 22. Because if I have 6 parties going to the same location, the idea that I wouldn't mess that up somehow is crazy. And I'm so curious for the flaws that I find when I read the thing and say, what would I have done differently? That is like, you know, and not everybody, some people feel really bad if they create bad work, but I'm confident it's not bad work. And with that confidence, it's kind of like, I'm going to see every place. I'm going to see every wart. I'm going to see, and that's really interesting to me. So that's part of my joy in comics is, like, I don't perseverate on things. I don't, if there are any ugly warts, to me they'll be beautiful. It'll be like if I had a daughter with ugly warts, she would be beautiful to me. You know what I mean? So I'm fine with that, but it will be fascinating regardless. And that's something that's a part of the creative process. I've put out maybe 40 records, and some of them have songs that would bleach your hair. They're so bad, and that is fascinating to me years later to be like, where was my head at? That's so interesting. Or the times that I hit it out of the park and had no idea at the time that I was doing something that's flawless. Like that's stuff that you and sorry, Brett, you missed like a spirited Nick Spencer talk. Which
it's probably for the better.
Which I have to apologize for. But that's kind of another space that I was interested in the podcast and the radio show's take on Nick Spencer is, for me personally, I have been on stage 2 years after writing a song, and I'm performing a song, and it'll get to the bridge, and I will realize what that song is about for the first time. And that is that's like, to me, one of the most edifying human experiences that I have. And in comics, you can trip over that as well. and I really love that part, like where, I didn't know. Like, I thought I knew what this was about, or I was just expressing myself in the broadest way possible, where I was just, whatever was coming into my mind, I was pushing out to the world because, like I'm a little baby artist that needs to constantly be pushing. You know what I mean? Like, and then you find out, what was it? The lens that I didn't even know I had 2 years ago. There it is. That is so cool. Sorry if I just lectured on. I'm sorry if I went long on that.
It's interesting.
It's an interesting comparison.
Yeah, with you creating music and also comics, so two questions on that. Is one, the creation process, like how does it differ? How is it similar to you? And the other would be is for interacting with fans and how they consume each different media. Like, how do you see that as a creator?
Well, I would say music. I actually, I'm going to spoil some back matter for a future issue here, I think, because I reflected on this recently, where music prepared me for collaboration in a way that maybe some comic creators struggle with. Like I having to manage so many different personalities with, even though we have there's a shared thrust to a band's work, people have different sensibilities. Like everybody brings an individual sensibility to a thing, and making that work is a word that people sometimes don't like. It's a matter of compromise. You know what I mean? It's like what serves the work, what is going to make the work the best, and managing different sensibilities to make the work the best instead of your part the best is like the struggle of young bands, and then when they dial that in, they become good bands. And I think that's what fascinated, that part of collaboration continues to fascinate me, and I think prepared me fairly well for comics. That part I'm pretty all right at. The part that it did not prepare me for is that the type of music that I've been interested in since the time I was 15 was music that makes no money. And now, and so in that capacity, I've been able to behave any way I want. Before I got on this podcast, my girl said, please, you're trying to have a career. Don't do that thing. And I said, what thing? And she said, that thing where you play devil's advocate or you have your well-intentioned nonsense where you want people to think about things and you say things like an a-hole and everybody hates you. And I said, well, I didn't know everybody hated me, my baby. We're gonna have to talk about this later. But the point is true, is that I've had the flexibility, the latitude to speak however I want to whoever I want. I don't need a career in music. When I feel people are being disrespectful, I can serve it right back, and that has ill prepared me for any career, and B, certainly one as political as comics, because I'm sure that there's a lot of aspiring creators listening to this radio. I've never experienced sort of corporate or career politics, and I worked in marketing. I've had plenty of straight jobs, and I've never seen politics like comics. And I don't mean the politics that you guys address on the show. I mean, office politics like that. I've never seen it like that, and I was totally ill prepared because as a musician, listen. I know that this is not the lane that you guys occupy, and I respect that. As a musician, I'll straight up just offer to fight somebody. You know what I mean? I'll say, okay, man. You know what I mean? I'll see you on the street. You know what I mean? But as a professional, you can't do that. So, and that has been honestly the biggest struggle in my professional life, because the comics part is such a joy. I goddamn love it. I got some new pages from the next Black Mask series that we'll announce probably maybe in October, and I just got some new pages, and I was thrilled in the same way that I was the first time that happened. That part, and I'm getting better at writing. That part is just so fun. But the part that I really fail at, and I struggle with, and I take full accountability for, no excuses, is the sort of networking, the peer-to-peer, that stuff. I was not built for, or I didn't have the background. It might be so. I'm not trying to just prescribe that I have no future because I am built a certain way, but I do not have that background to help me, and that is a comic book thing so it has prepared me in some ways and also has maladapted me in some ways.
Well, it's a good way to kind of begin to wrap things up. I guess the one final question would be, out of working in comics and really coming out, as an outsider into it, what is like the biggest lesson that you've learned, and what advice would you give to other people who want to get into it?
Purely practical matter: create short work until you're good. That is the most nuts and bolts thing that I could ever give anybody, but because I'm sure you guys encounter this, people with really big ambitions, and those are beautiful, and I support them. They're not the thing to do out the gate. And honestly, I say this only as a craftsperson, not a successful comic creator, because I make a pittance. I'm not a successful comic book creator, but in the respect that I think my work is becoming very successful on an art level. I honestly create 3-page stories, tell a page in 3 stories. That's the most nuts and bolts practical matter I could assign. And then the other practical matter that I think is ugly and I hate it and it makes me resentful and I want to scream it to heaven is be a social person. Interact with your peers in a respectful way. Be interested in their work in a genuine way that doesn't make them suspect you. You know what I mean? Support each other as much as possible. And these are things that I can assure any aspiring creator are important, because I have failed to do them completely, and I feel that I am somewhat behind where I should be because of that, something I take full accountability for. So create
and
short
that you
work.
actually wrote about that some in the back matter of one of your first comics. I thought that was a really interesting essay.
Yeah, I'm
definitely
glad
one of the more helpful back matters. Yeah, definitely one of the more helpful back matters I've seen in a comic. So praise for having done that. Yeah.
Well, it's something in comics that kind of frustrates me is, and it might frustrate you on a different level, all right? Like, because you guys have a lens that you apply to comics, that you are interested in the responsibility of comics, something that you and I should talk about in a different context sometime. But the responsibility and the politics. So you probably hate when creators circle the wagon around, for example, bad behavior, right? Like they circle the wagon, and that probably disgusts you. And we can talk about that all day. But I am disgusted by people circling the wagon around bad work. Bad behavior, sure. I really hate that as much as you do. We understand that's an ugly fucking, that's like that blue shield sort of thing where, you know what I mean, where you just kind of, somebody's in your field, so you're defending them for a reason or go against your mind, go against your conscience, go against your heart, and that's all ugly. But when people circle the wagons around bad work, there's something that just, I'm so rankled by that. And I don't think we should be out here tearing each other down, but it's okay. I know you guys want to wrap up, and I apologize for just jabbing. But how do you guys feel about these comic book gossip sites?
Oh, God. I mean, we hate, well, I shouldn't say we.
There's one shall not be named.
Yeah, the site that shall not be named is fucked up, and people shouldn't give them interviews, and every now and then smart people write for them, and it breaks my heart.
Okay, so I have a different perspective. I see everything that is gross and ugly about any sort of gossip site. However, I also see it as a sign of a healthy industry. And when those sites go away, we are going to think about that in a way. We're going to say, oh, like the fact that literary criticism comes best from other writers. That's a thing that we've seen time and time again. It used to be that you could be that novelists, I mean, they still do, but much more of a phenomenon, particularly in the 70s, you could just look, it was novelists of note critiquing other novelists in magazines of the day, giving their review
some of the best
work.
shit. Definitely, yeah.
And that, to me, the fact that we can't do that is a sign of an unhealthy art. I don't think we're in a good... That's certainly not my complaint about it.
I'm more than fine with people writing behind people's backs about why X, Y, and Z's art is a failure, especially when there aren't enough critical analysis in the websites that get all the specials from the big publishers. You know, that's definitely an issue. That's not my critique of the site at all. But I also generally don't find that there's a whole lot of critical analysis around things like why a certain work is bad as art or bad as a social document in those places necessarily either. But, you know, there are sites that are doing great stuff like ours. Thank you very much. But anyway, I do want to thank you again for coming on and for joining us on this because, like I said, you know, we've both really enjoyed the work here. I definitely got to get Maria on sometime to talk about the art because the visuals on There's Nothing There are fantastic. And can you let our listeners know where the best place to find you on the internet is?
You can reach me at my name on Twitter. It's also my email at Gmail. It's just Patrick Kindlon. That's Kindlon. You can reach Maria at her Twitter handle, which I believe has an underscore. So I apologize. I'm not going to say it to mess it up because I don't know where the underscore goes. But you can reach either of us there. We're happy to engage with most conversations, and really you should get Maria on because a secret about her is that her English is definitely better than mine. So because I think there's so much talent coming out of Europe right now, like that is not maybe getting recognized by the Belgians and the French and like there's some beautiful like Croatian artists. There's some great Spanish artists. And they're not, they have names there, but they're not breaking through in a way that I think they should. And so I aspire to work with them, and I was so glad Maria did. But I was concerned, I wonder. English is not her first language. I wonder how, and she speaks it better than I do. So you could definitely,
Oh, I know.
definitely
People
pin
are
her
so
down.
humble about that. People are so humble about, oh, my English isn't good. Usually means like I speak English extremely well. So yeah, no, I know people can feel self-conscious about that. When I say my Spanish is terrible, it really is, and people don't believe me, but they humor me. But yeah. Cool.
I'd like to thank you both. Thank you both for having me on. I apologize. I tend to be long-winded, and if I talked over anybody, then that's my bad. As I mature as a human being, I'm doing my best. But thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you. I hope to speak soon.
Yeah,
likewise.
Definitely.
So before we wrap, just to let folks know what's up next, on Wednesday, that is the 21st of June, I am hosting the next Pop Politics Chat Twitter conversation, which is a tweet chat at 9 p.m. Eastern that will be about Wonder Woman, specifically the movie. I'm being joined by Cher from Sci-Fi Girls, from the Sci-Fi Network's Blaster website. She runs the women's page, which is freaking awesome. And she started a really cool fundraiser actually coming out of the Wonder Woman movie, which we'll hear more about, and is one of the reasons why I wanted to invite her on. Also joined by Caitlin Roseberg from the Onion AV Club, who's really done some fantastic writing about women in comics and geek culture and representation. And then Anita Jackson, who works for a feminist organization called Moms Rising, that is like a really interesting organization that does online and offline activism that supports working families and low-income families and moms and folks who support moms. So the three of them will be joining me for a chat on Twitter on Wednesday about the movie. You can look at hashtag #PopPoliticsChat on Twitter to find out more about that. And we'll be tweeting out another link to it as well. But basically, we want to have fans and activists come on Twitter, have a discussion about the significance of the movie and what activists can learn from it, as well as ways that people who support social change can use the movie to further our causes. Because I think that there's a lot of untapped power that we can have coming out of the movie. And there already are fans doing cool things with the movie in their activism, and we'll tell you more about that at the time. So that's Wednesday, hashtag #PopPoliticsChat. And if you miss it, you can always join in the conversation later. And then next week, we'll be back with Melanie Gilman, who writes As the Crow Flies, which is a really beautiful graphic novel that's coming out soon. And they also write the awesome Steven Universe comic. And Brett, what's new at Graphic Policy other than a panning review of Transformers, the movie?
I'm expecting multiples of those. We've got a new contributor who's already has two awesome pieces up. The first one was a really interesting take on Cars 3 that folks should go check out. You might laugh at it, but he has a wonderful take that actually gets me to want to see the film, and I've never seen a Cars film in my life. And another a little about the recent baseball game between the Democrats and the Republicans that is a rather interesting reflective piece as well. And we've got more people showing up too. Plus this week we'll have coverage of AwesomeCon. I believe we should have some Heroes Con coming up, and our usual like reviews, interviews, and all that fun stuff. So folks check that out every single day at graphicpolicy.com because there's always something new. And if you don't want to go and check a website all the time, you can follow us at Graphic Policy on Twitter and Facebook and Tumblr and YouTube, and pretty much if it exists, there's a Graphic Policy on there. We keep it nice and consistent.
And I'm on Twitter all the goddamn time at ELANA_Brooklyn.
And for those who want to listen to the show, came in late like myself, and want to listen to it again or share it with other folks, it'll be up on iTunes and Stitcher in probably like an hour or two, and then it'll also be on SoundCloud tomorrow and posted to our site so you can catch it there. As always, thank you so much for listening. Until next time, I'm Brett.
I'm Elana.
Keep it geeky.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.